For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Alchemy of Pain. This podcast was started because none of us get out of this life escaping challenges or painful situations. But what I've learned is it's what you do with them. They can either make you bitter or better. You can shut down or press forward. And my initial guests have all been people that have inspired me at one point or another in my life. And I remember meeting Kevin Connor almost 10 years ago when we were both members of the Mainline Chamber of Commerce's foundation, which is the philanthropic arm. And someone around my age, someone who was in the business of branding and an excellent communicator. When Kevin walked into the room, everybody wanted to listen to him, and I wanted to be his friend. And then I found out that he had went through a health challenge, which was kind of surprising for someone our age. Since that time, it's been a decade, he has had such entrepreneurial success and has given back to his communities in so many ways. And so I just had to have my friend Kevin Connor here. Kevin, so nice to see you.
Brenda, I love that introduction. Thanks for sharing.
Well, what's so great is when the rug came out from under me in my life, and I had to rebuild my life. There was a short list of people I wanted to reach out to. And even though I hadn't talked to you in almost a decade, you were on that list because you always had a listening ear and a kind word. And so I just really appreciate that about you. Tell people what you do today.
Well, thanks. I'm going to jump in for a sec because I'll also echo that. When you reached out, yours is a name that I remembered. And although we haven't talked, I remember the energy, the spirit, and the enthusiasm you carried with you and said, you know what? If Brenda Viola's calling me, I'm at least checking out to find out what's going on here. So, so your question, what do we do? Is that what it was?
Yeah, yes. Modern SBC. Sure. I see that in your title, but what is modern SBC?
So we're corporate storytellers. We help people express who they are, what they do, and why they do it. And we do that mostly through graphic solutions. We help people communicate better. It could be their website, could be a trade show booth, could be a brochure, direct mail piece, promotional product, apparel, everything that we help shape your brand in the way that you want your clients and your employees to see it.
What I found, because I got to work with you professionally too, in another position that I had in another life.
Different administration, right?
What you draw the stories out. You know, I think a lot of companies don't know where to begin, or they think they know their story. Mm-hmm. But I recall vividly you listening and asking questions so that we could really synthesize what the messaging should be and then the visuals to back it up. So listening is a really important part of what you do.
You know what? You're looking at one of the worst finance majors that Temple University ever got out. I was in the wrong field for about 3.5 years. Took my first marketing class, second half of my senior year. I knew I wanted to get out, but I really liked communications. I wasn't liking finance so much, but what a great place to learn at the time. So I got into it, and I've always been fascinated with how people communicate, whether it's drawings on a wall, films, books. How do people express to one another their ideas? And it's an ongoing challenge for me as well. I'm trying to work on your game and get better as much as I can. That's part of the fun for me. Although what you said, people often say that one of the greatest fears people have is speaking to an audience. I would say right up there, if not above that, is give people a blank sheet of paper and tell me about yourself. Tell me about your company. And it's a difficult topic to do because many of us are not humble, but we're at least humble enough. We have humility. We're not there to brag about ourselves, right? But trying to put it into a voice that your customers care, that the search engines care about. right? If I'm working with Brenda, I don't care. I don't care what Brenda thinks. I care who are the people that are looking for Brenda. I want to know what they're thinking, right? So you're trying to calibrate your story with an online presence and make sure that you're findable, right? People can search you and get you, and they can read about you and say, you know what, I'm going to call them back. If I'm going to look, or they're just going to click and go away. They may not be for everybody. So,
I'm actually sitting here thinking maybe I need to hire you again. Because VP
but there are
communications,
plenty of good to talk about, and exactly,
we
we'll find out where you're going.
we'll talk about that
We'll talk
offline.
about that differently, but
You are, before we get into your personal story, you are part of a group called Entrepreneurs Organization. You are a very vibrant, active entrepreneur. And every entrepreneur I've ever talked to has gone through some dark times. And this is a podcast about going through dark times.
Great, good for you.
What are some of the challenges faced by entrepreneurs?
One of the ones that I faced was I didn't look at myself as an entrepreneur. I looked at myself more as a desperatepreneur. And the reason why, because I worked at a company and I had just moved into a new house. And 6 weeks later, I had a wife and 3 kids at home. My wife is not working. 6 weeks later, I was a sales rep for a company. The owner comes in right after Christmas. We moved in middle of November. He comes in after Christmas. I'm going to sell the company. And I was like, holy sugar, right? It wasn't, I said more than that, you can imagine. But you get to a point where my job, it wasn't uncommon in our industry for people to be sold and just be absorbed by somebody and get rid of the extra fat. So I said, oof. He said, why don't you go meet your new boss? And I was like, you already have the buyer? I was like, wow, you got this all down. So maybe one of those feelings, I went and met with the new buyer, and I remember coming back, and where I was driving on the Schuylkill with the expressway by us. And I said, man, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I think I might be able to do what that guy's going to do. So I talked to the guy. I said, would you be open to me buying the company? And he said, yeah. So, and that's why I say desperate. Like I didn't really intend to be an entrepreneur, but looking back, it was kind of funny. Like there had been jobs. I've been working since I was 11 years old, right? So you just kind of do stuff and you think about shoveling driveways, mowing lawns, driving cars, working in restaurants. Like it was always hustling. Like I just liked having money. So maybe it was there all along. I don't know. You just kind of figured it out.
Probably is there all along. I mean, I think similarly, the evolution from having a full-time position to being Vici Communications really was out of kind of feeling like you got kicked a bit out of the nest by circumstances I would have never chosen. And yet it probably was there all along. And
maybe just wanted a new adventure, right? Maybe just look at wow, what else can I do?
It makes you feel alive to have a brand new adventure. And having been, my audience knows, I had been through a series of losses. And I think I really and truly needed to feel alive as Brenda Viola again in a new way. So that's an excellent point, Kevin.
Yeah.
So when I met you, we were in a room and we were the board of the Mainline Chamber Foundation. And I remember hearing, and it wasn't talked about openly, but you had just had a health challenge. And I'm thinking, this guy's my age. We didn't have health challenges at this age. And I'm sure that you probably thought the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I was 49 years old and I had I would go, the YMCA, it was there every morning and usually early in the morning at 5 o'clock. So I went one day at 5 o'clock. It was a Friday morning, November 15th. And I went there and I just felt really a little bit funny. Like the Y was 4 mile drive for me, so it took me 5 or 10 minutes to get there. I'm like, maybe I was a little tired this morning. And I went in there and I was riding a bike just to loosen up. And this girl, my gym wife next to me, her name was Nina, and she's there. We talk every morning. I have no idea. I didn't know what her last name was at the time. And she just looked down at me. She's like, Kevin, you look like shit. Get off that bike. And I was like, what? She said, no, you really look. Why don't you just go sit down? I was like, all right. So I went and sat down, and the fitness trainer there came over and took me and said, you know what? You're not looking good. I'm calling the EMTs. And they came and I was having a stroke. So fortunate for me, there was a lot of people. It was a 2-week excursion and about learning and about myself. But I was fortunate. Many people, I was better than many people. I'll say it that way. Many people have to do what I went through, and turn out a lot worse. I was very fortunate. So that was just my story.
of all the places for you to be, you were in a gym surrounded by
Yeah.
people that knew how to respond.
I got taken up on a gurney. How many people that happened to? It happens to more people than I thought. I thought I was alone, but I said this happens occasionally. I'm like, wow. So, and you know what?
And
So
you had no indication prior that there was
nope,
any health matter.
no family situation, nothing like that in our family. Right. It just I had a little hemorrhage in the back of my head, and it was like a hiccup, but it was enough to trigger these things. So, you know what? It was a Friday morning. I got taken to the hospital, and my wife got called, and late Friday night when I was kind of stabilized, she thought, okay, maybe it's not so bad. And I just remember this words. One of the doctors said, "Oh, when you come back tomorrow, can you bring a copy of his will?" And she was like, "Okay, we're not in other woods just yet." Right. So, and I say that not to impress you, but to press upon people. Like that's, even though anything can happen. Right. So,
And yes, well aware that anything can happen. And in this, clearly and thankfully, you made it out through
I
the
was
other
fortunate.
side.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from the physical shock of having a stroke at age 49, mentally, what was the after effect?
It's an ongoing point of contention between my wife. I'm going to share a story that I don't mean, again, it's not meant to impress. It's meant to impress upon you how the mind can respond. So I was in here, and Brenda, I was in the hospital for 12 days. And how do I say this? I was just, it never, I mean, not once, I say not once did it ever enter my mind that I wasn't leaving there. I don't know why. I'm under there. I'm in these intensive care units all around. I have no idea why I didn't think that I'd be taken out of there somehow. To me, it was an inconvenience. I know that may sound kind of cocky, but that was not the way it was intended. I've been accused of being an impatient person, and I really just wanted to get back to my life. And I'm working. I had stuff to do and clients to take care of. And but fortunate for me, I'm a business partner with my sister, so we had staff at the office that could pick up and run. But I was able to talk a little bit about what was going on and help them relay the story. Take care. Hey, make sure this is taken care of. Make sure this customer's taken care of. So again, I was very fortunate. That was my situation.
You were in the hospital for 12 days, and at
Mm-hmm.
no point did you even entertain the thought that you weren't getting out of there. I wonder if that's
No
just
idea why.
your life force was
Um,
like, not my time.
I didn't even like it. I don't think I was smart enough to know what I was going through exactly. Like I'd heard I had a stroke, and my wife was talking, and they were moving me around. I'm just like, all right, we'll go here, and I got this cardiologist and neurologist, and I'm just like, like in my head, I was just like, all right, I just want to get back to what I was doing, not giving it enough thought. And that was one of the things that probably hurt my wife, in that she was just like, you're not taking this serious enough. Like I just want to get back to work, and I was impatient. I was impatient. That is not an uncommon trait. My wife says that it got accelerated through what I went through. You said you have a quicker temper and you're more impatient. But I don't think it's like I don't attribute it to being I went through this, so I'm not really sure how long I have, so I make sure I get all this stuff done. It's just um I I find that I'm less tolerant with how do I say this, with ignorant or depressing or people that aren't optimistic, pessimistic people. I just don't necessarily want to be around them. I don't, maybe we all feel that way, but maybe I feel that way more. So,
Well,
um,
I think that when you have a close encounter with this scary situation, you want to protect what you let in, for sure. I know I
mhm,
do. I mean,
yeah,
I've had enough sadness. I really don't want to surround myself with anything that's going to
yeah.
bring me further down.
I don't need more. I get enough. My book is pretty full. So,
That's why I don't watch scary movies, Kevin, because life is scary enough. I don't need drama.
that's a great
I
line. Good for you.
let's,
Yeah,
let's reduce the drama.
there you
Absolutely.
go.
Okay. Do you think that maybe you were a little bit in la la land about not really getting the impact of this? Clearly, your wife And
Yeah.
I feel for her.
Um, that's a good point I hadn't thought about. Was I in La La Land? What I remember, I mean, this is going back a few years, 10 years ago. I remember thinking, I don't ever remember feeling I was in La La Land. I'll say it that way. But I think my outlook was just maybe it was little what's the rose-colored glasses? Like I was just thinking, like, well, doesn't everybody? No, not everybody does that way. As a matter of fact, Mr. Connor, what you had is called a widowmaker. That's what it was called. But I didn't really think about it. I was fortunate, right? So these are things my wife told me later on. That's what was going on behind the scenes. So,
So it wasn't really, it was this buoyancy, that your
oh, great
natural
word. Yeah,
buoyancy.
yeah. You know what? You asked, you think about what did I learn about myself from that event? That's probably one of the phrases that I have leaned on. I think I do have a natural buoyancy and optimism. I'm not sure where it came from. My mother was that way. My father was pretty much that way. We grew up in a sales environment. I was one of 7 kids. That was, I'm just, I was the fat little kid that everything my mother cooked, I liked to eat. I was like, Mom, what's for dinner? And everybody else would be like, oh, no, not that again. I'm like, oh my God, I love that. Everything she said, I loved, right? She must have since always, because everything was pretty good. There's a lot of worse off people than me. There's a lot of worse off people than me. I was pretty fortunate. So,
So I think maybe that's why when I met you, and I would have never known that you had been through a serious health challenge, because your demeanor and your whole aura was very positive.
yeah.
So would you say that the event changed you or fine-tuned you in any way?
Ooh, fine tuning. That's a good phrase I had not thought about. I'm always looking for the extremes, but fine tune is probably you go home and tell people tonight, and people were taking notes when you were talking, because I thought that's a pretty good term right there. Fine tune. I'm going to write that one down and think about it. So, and thank you for that. That's pretty cool. I'll go with that. I'd like to think so, but we're all evolving, right? So you're always just kind of chipping away at your marble and figuring out who you are and shaping yourself. So that was probably a step for me. And I don't lead with that. Like we've had this conversation, so I knew what to expect. But most people I meet, I wouldn't tell that. And it's not because I don't care. It's just everybody's dealing with something, right? That happened to be mine. That was under the skin. You wouldn't see it. Probably wouldn't know it if you didn't know me. So I'm here
Well,
today.
so here's the deal. The reason I'm doing this podcast is because there are so many people out there facing so many different things. I've interviewed a young man who just had his leg amputated, and a woman whose husband was deployed in a combat zone, another young man who deals with gripping anxiety, although you would never know it because he's a performance coach.
Wow.
My own story of loss and loss and loss. And, it's not about honoring or building an altar to the pain, but for the person watching to say, wow, this dude went through that and it didn't stop him.
Yeah.
It wasn't the end of the story. The whole point is to encourage people. Yeah, you would never lead with this because you're not a victim of what happened. But because it's part of your story and because you're such a vibrant, positive, buoyant person, that's sort of why I wanted to interview you. So you
Mm-hmm.
never once gave yourself the space to feel sorry for yourself.
Um, not about that. Look, I look at it, we're all on the path, and we all the zigzag path, and some people come on the path in different places than others. So, and I didn't start at the beginning either. So you've had your doubts and your wonder and your insecurities. We've all worked through them. But as I get older, I just kind of keep moving forward, and they just get up, dust off, and say, you know what? I don't know. Okay, I learned this lesson. Here we go. I keep several volumes of journals and just like lessons I've learned. Right, just I write them down. I've been doing that for many years, 30 some years. Somebody told me early on. Somebody I listened to early on. There was a guy named Earl Nightingale, which many of your maybe you've heard of him. And I was just always amazed with his story. I found he sent me a cassette tape in 1987, and a cassette tape like direct mail. I'm like, what the hell is this? I listened to it. I had a long ride to work. I had to work out in Broomall from where I was living. And I drove and I'm like, oh my God, it was like a University on Wheels, my car. Like I just became a junkie. I'd like listen to this stuff. I'm like, like I've had 16 years of education. I don't ever remember hearing any of this stuff. Like this is like it wasn't book learning. It was just about attitude and outlook and working with people. And it's just like, man, this is I was just hungry for this stuff, you know? So who knew?
Do you think that infusing your life with the curiosity to learn and grow is actually what helped you face probably, and I'm sure we're only talking about this one health
Yeah,
challenge, but you've probably faced a series of challenges in your
yeah,
life, almost like you were in training for life
yeah.
with
That's funny you say
Nightingale
that.
tape and some of your other,
Yeah,
book of things that you've learned.
yeah. That's a very good insight. And so, as you mentioned before, we worked at the mainline Chamber of Commerce, and there was a person there, and I remember his name was Bob. I can't remember the guy's last name, but I always remember he had a very successful engineering company, did very well for himself. And he said, yeah, talking to people, he said, I just learned to watch people and don't listen to people so much anymore. And people could say a lot of things, but what are they doing? And I've always in the back of my head kind of watched that and said, that's one of those life lessons I'm writing down. And you get this big book of knowledge by the time you're my age, and you just kind of say, what are we doing? So that did help to shape and form. That's a very good insight in that curiosity is probably the one word I fall back on most often. And I've been told I'm good at asking questions, just talking to people, and like you're asking terrific questions, right? So I like being around people like this that force me to think about things. And I'm like, I hadn't really thought about that one. But curiosity is pretty. It's a pretty good compass. It's been a good compass for me, right? So just gonna leave
Well,
with questions.
you have a remarkable gift for making people feel seen and heard. So it's really kind of fun to turn the tables on you, my friend. One of the things that you always say, and you always, every conversation I've ever had with you, not to impress you, but to impress upon you when you're making a point. Where did that come from?
I can tell you exactly where that came from. Roger Kosover was his name, and I belonged to a Toastmasters group in 1996. And he used that phrase. I know exactly where it was when I heard it. And I said, man, I wrote that down. I thought that was great because how many times, probably like you and your listeners, we felt that way. Like, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just telling you, I want you to hear it. Make sure you hear it because I thought it was pretty important. Right. So it was important in my story. And I think maybe it can help you. But you mentioned before, somebody else gave me another phrase. They said, show them the scar, not the wound. And I thought, I was like, I had to kind of take that one away here. Like, I'm not going to talk to you about what happened, but I'll tell you, hey, I wear this. Here's what happened. And I give you this. Here's how I came out of it. Right. I thought that was pretty good language. So I think you can apply it to everybody.
And
So
it's actually a great sort of byline for this entire series, and certainly the perfect title for this interview.
feel free to
So
use it. Go for it.
I'm gonna. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'll credit
Yeah.
you though. So, Kevin, did you have to make modifications to your lifestyle?
um, Great question. That I think that look, I'm 59 years old and I don't need less reasons to sweat. I don't need to sweat less. So I'm looking for more movement. I'm trying to get more action in my life. Um, Doing things, moving. I lead a sedentary life by my job, pretty much. So I look to move around a lot. It could be as simple as standing at your desk. There's somebody in my office now. She has a stand-up desk. There's two people. So I'm just like, all right, I got to do that now, right? I've heard about them, but here they were doing them. So I feel better that way. I like going for one of the things, maybe like a lot of other people during COVID. Now, a lot of us go for walks. Instead of going for a coffee, we'll go for a walk. Great. What a great idea, right? Just movement inspires energy and emotion. I find kind of come out pretty good. They do for me. I'll say it that way.
Yes, and it's good for your mental health too. I just incorporated some new components to my routine because, you know, just turned 60 and I want to be here for the long haul.
Yeah.
I want to do whatever I need to do so that I have this vision of me visiting Italy when I'm 80. I'm going to visit before then, but when I'm 80 years old, I can walk through the cobblestone streets of Sorrento in Italy and I can do it well, not
Yeah.
hobbling around. That's what I want to be strong for the
Yeah.
future. Before, I know we have just a few more minutes left, but I want to just say if someone's watching and they have been through a health crisis, what advice would you give them? And also, if a spouse, what advice would you give a spouse of someone who has had a health crisis? Two different questions.
Okay. One of the things I worked hard on, Brenda, was getting back to normal, although it really may have been creating a new normal. Like, I want to retain as much of the things that I liked that I'm still able to do as I can. I had to take 6 weeks off from driving. I wasn't allowed to drive for 6 weeks. So it's very humbling when somebody else is responsible for your mobility, right? And that can all, like personal care. Like, I was able to take a shower and take care of everything else by myself. Again, very fortunate, but not everybody has that luxury. And you just have a new appreciation for different people's stories and say, you know what, maybe I can be a little bit more compassionate and empathetic in how I respond to that. And I'm sure you've heard it, and your listeners have heard it before. A lot of people are dealing with quiet issues that might be under the table. You might not see them, right? Like you said, like, you wouldn't know me if I didn't tell you that stroke. You wouldn't have known. Again, I was very fortunate. Not everybody's that way. So, and spouses, ooh, boy, that's can be a challenging one. Different outlooks on what can happen. And I told my kids, I had 3 kids as well. I said, look, I can go through the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, and I'm not going to do this, not going to do that. I choose not to do that, pretty much. I'm just going to I don't want to live like that. And it may not be the best for me all the time, but that's the way I'm doing it. And again, I'm pretty fortunate. Not that I'm stupid to make reckless things. I'm not doing evil Knievel stuff. I never did that before, so I'm certainly not doing it now. But the type of things, right? You're just gonna, okay, I can handle that. And you're the best. Nobody knows you better than you. And to talk to your spouse that way and say, look, here's my outlook on life. Here's the things I want to do, and I'm going to work towards this. And I'm in the fishbowl. You're outside the fishbowl looking at me. Although the people on the outside, they have different viewpoints, right? So you have to calibrate what you're learning from them, taking in, and trying to make work for all of you. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what I got.
No, it's good. And it's food for thought too. I think about having been on the side of being a spouse and not wanting to nag my partner to go to the doctor. And yet how I wish that I had taken the bull by the horns like those people at the gym did.
Yeah, sometimes, you know what? Right. And that's a fine calibration line. How far are you going to go? And somebody else said to me sometime, to his spouse, he said, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. Now that it can sound a little bit too interdependent, right? But it's okay to be somewhere maybe in the middle. I get that, but I'm not one. I don't like to be taken care of. I'm sick. I just like to do stuff myself, and I don't say that to brag. It's just where I'm at. Nor do I want to take care of somebody else, right? I'm not a good provider. I don't think I'd be a good nurse, or certainly not a good hospice person. That's just not me. I wouldn't have the patience. Daycare center, not doing that. Love kids, don't want to work with them, right? So.
I love that you know who you are.
I'm learning, just like everybody else. I'm not sure I'm completely there, but I got enough going on. So I got enough to work on. I got stuff to work on, Brenda.
Well, in my estimation, again, you're just a true friend. Like, you genuinely care about people. You care about doing good in this world. You care about doing good work too. You're a joy to work with. And I just think for anybody watching, look, we're not here to make people afraid. No, we want to empower people to live, but listen to your body. Yeah. If something feels a little off, there's no shame in getting it checked out, because you want to be here.
Think about the people you want to populate your orbit with, right? You get to curate your orbit. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. 10 years go by, we haven't talked, right? Pretty much coming back together. We got to see each other once or twice. So it's just kind of certain people you want to move on, and people you want to have in your, what's going on over there, right? So you just kind of check them out and keep them in. And how easy is it now? Of course, you got email, you got Zoom, you got LinkedIn. It's easy to find out what's going on, right?
Yeah.
But being able to call them, pick up the phone and say, hey, I need some of your juice. Give me some of your Jamba juice there. You got, and I want to hear your voice, right? So
And my friend Kevin Connor has Jamba Juice in spades when it comes to positive, buoyant juju. Any final words that you like? If this is a big chance for just someone who's listening and they just stumbled across this podcast and maybe they have nothing to do with having a health challenge or this and that, but maybe they're an entrepreneur. Maybe they're, what would you say? What would you just, someone listening that
I
would
love to my kids. I get yelled at for just talking. I talk to anybody and everybody. Just practice. It's a big sandbox out there. Get out there, shake a hand, find out what people are going through. Maybe you can help them. Maybe you've built a list of contacts that maybe you never know what conversation can change your life, right? So just go for that and don't be afraid of it. It's good practice. We're connecting. That's all. We just want to connect. So that's my advice.
It's a big sandbox out there, and I am really glad that I get to be in a sandbox with someone like you. Thanks for your time today, Kevin.
We get to play in the sandbox together. We're both having fun, right? Meeting people and helping the world. So keeping it. We got work to do. We got too much stuff to do. All right.
And speaking of work, how can people find you if they want to work with you and Modern SBC?
Ooh, good question. So www.modernsbcsamboycharlie.com. It stands for Strategic Branding and Communications. Maybe one of the worst effects I ever did was choose those words with all those syllables, but that's it. K Connor, CONNOR at modernsbc.com will get you back to me. And I'd love to hear people's stories. I like them to express who they are and what their company's doing. That's the fun part for us. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for tuning into this edition of the Alchemy of Pain podcast. If you know someone who has been through some stuff, and don't we all, but they've made it through. How did they? What were the tools they used? How were they changed forever or fine-tuned? Please contact me. I'd love to interview them. I hope you have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Brenda.